I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Cullen Hoback, the director of the docuseries Q Into the Storm, which is on HBO Max right now. And it's all about the QAnon conspiracy that has taken over right-wing politics. The first thing I want to ask you is I want you to take me back to January 6th. What was that day like for you, and when did it become apparent to you that this was escalating into something insane?
Well, I think for anybody who had been really tracking uh, QAnon and MAGA more broadly, and was even if you just looked at like what Trump had said in the weeks advance, that he was asking for a wild protest. You knew that things were kind of coalescing, would coalesce on that date. Um, I got to DC a couple of days earlier. It was or a day earlier, I guess. Um, I mean, I was incredibly anxious going into it, um, because I didn't know how bad it was going to be. Uh, and I think that for anyone who had really been tracking it, um, this seemed like it was the moment where things could really tip. And I wanted to be there to document Jim's involvement and really get a sense of how he reacted to these events. Jim Watkins, the owner of 888 who is one of the main characters in Q Into the Storm, how he would react to something that he had very much helped to facilitate, he and his son. Um, I didn't sleep much the nights going into it. And that day was one of them. I mean, it was a project full of nerve-wracking experiences, but that one was by far the most. It was very touch and go that day. I think anybody who was there would tell you that. I know there was one point where I asked Jim, like, could we please maybe move a little bit away from um, the sort of grandstands that had been set up, the scaffolding that people were scaling, and yeah, it was. Uh, so I hadn't slept much going into the day, but uh, yeah, I mean, I still am grateful that it wasn't worse than it was.
So I think the other thing, you have to almost separate into two parts. You have the actual riot itself, and then everything that has come afterwards. And we just saw that a bipartisan commission to do an investigative report into what happened, into everything that happened, and the failings of January 6th was blocked in the Senate. What has been your reaction to the attempted rewriting of the events of January 6th and the blocking of a commission to investigate it?
Well, I mean, I'm not entirely surprised that they don't want to investigate something that that they more or less kind of that helped happen. They don't want to alienate their base, and they don't want to. Um, you see a narrative right now that is kind of pointing towards Antifa, and of course, if you investigate it, you're going to find out who was there that day. Obviously, the six didn't happen because of Q, but it also wouldn't have happened without Q. You had a lot of ex-military players who were you see in Q Into the Storm who were prodding and poking to make it happen. You had the Proud Boys there. You had a lot of these other elements there. But again, when we were walking around that day, I mean, you could hear chants that were all QAnon chants, songs that were QAnon, inspired, and lots of paraphernalia. So it was a huge factor in that day. Um, uh, as to the motivations, I mean, certainly we need to understand why the response was the way that it was, and yeah, there need to be further investigations. It doesn't surprise me that the Republican Party has opted not to do that, and that way, if you don't investigate it, you can say whatever story you want, and that's very much how Q works, right? It is trying to will an alternate reality into reality, which is actually what was happening on the 6th. That was a lot of individuals who had shared goals coming together to sort of meme the Q narrative into reality.
So I'm curious as to one of the things that I really appreciated about the documentary was that not only do you dive into Q and the conspiracy theories, but you also dived into the internet culture that helped spawn and nurture that conspiracy theory, going back to things like Gamergate. And I was curious as to how familiar were you with that culture prior to beginning work on this docuseries?
So I had never been on 8chan. I'd never been on 4chan before this. I'm familiar with broader internet culture, a big Reddit user, which is like a mainstream version of the chans. Um, but I think that it helped me communicate this story better to the audience because I was able to take them along the same journey that I went through, trying to make sense of an intentionally complicated world, a world that tries to keep normies or normal normal people uh, out. And I felt that the best way to think about something like Q wasn't to go after the various theories that and beliefs and try to debunk them. If you try to debunk a conspiracy, you just become a part of it. So instead, I focused on the mechanics. What makes QAnon tick, and going all the way back to the ecosystem from which Q is born. And I don't think I know actually for a fact that the vast majority of people who believe in QAnon have never been to 8chan, now 8kun, don't really understand anything about the world that Q was coming from or the personalities behind it. So that's a big part of why I felt it was necessary to demystify those spaces. And obviously, something is usually much scarier when you can just imagine it to be anything. But when you put a face on something, when you actually show it for what it is, the antiseptic of sunlight's not all that flattering.
So, I mentioned you were witness to the incredible tension of the events of January 6th, but we also got to see part of another unbelievable piece of tension with the events of Frederick Brennan trying to flee the Philippines at the airport, I guess in Manila. And I'm curious, what was that journey in the airport like, and was it truly as tense as it comes off in the documentary?
Well, you're just you're doing the greatest hits of like worst days of my life from the past from the past couple of years.
I should start charging.
If anything, that we weren't even able to include all of the things that made that day as tense and kind of stressful as it actually was. Um, we did not add any elements of sensationalization to what went down that day. How narrowly he escaped. What was going like just the fact that the power was out that day, that once again his lawyer had screwed up and you didn't have the correct documentation to get out of there. Like we didn't include this. My wife's grandmother literally died the night before I found out, like right after I got to Manila. So I had to get out of there too. We had Corona on our heels. I literally got in on the last flight that led in from Hong Kong into Manila. It was very high stakes that day, and no small miracle that we managed to get out of there. Um, it was the last we got the last seats on that plane, and if we hadn't caught that, it would be a very different story. And I strongly suspect that, given the conditions of the prison system there and the fact that COVID was really picking up, that someone like Fred with his condition would not have survived.
So I feel like I'm just like hitting like a scavenger hunt map of all the various characters in the movie. So what's really interesting about Ron Watkins and Jim Watkins is really how, maybe uncomfortable isn't the right word, but uneasy you feel about them just from the way that they come off watching them in the docu series. And I was curious, which one made you feel more uneasy as you were as you were hanging around them?
Ask me those questions like while you're drinking water, you're just gunning for spit takes. Okay. I mean, when you spend time with Jim, you can see it on the sixth. He has these moments where there's a real fire in his eyes. Um, and that can be pretty unsettling. So it's those moments where you ask him a question that he really doesn't want to answer, but he's trying to keep his composure. I can only imagine that his eyes like had that quality during the entire congressional hearing that was closed, so I wasn't able to be in there to film it. But yeah, Jim can be a very intimidating and intense guy. As he self-describes, he's an industrialist. So um, there's a little bit of there will be blood in him.
And you also have that amazing moment at the end with Ron, where he basically kind of slips up, and he has that smile that kind of gives it away. And I was already like so into it, but then once that happened, it was like, oh wow, this was an incredible journey. And I'm curious as to whether or not he has contacted you since the film, since the series premiered, and if he's if he's tried to distance himself from that since that somewhat of a admission.
Well, I mean, on Telegram and on the forums he now uses to communicate with his audience, he says what he always says, which is that he's not Q. However, he has messaged me since then. One of the messages he sent me, he said, Cullen, I'm going to get the quote not quite right, but one of the things that he said was that one of the things that he's learned is that on the internet, you need to make characters larger than life, and it makes for a more entertaining existence. The other thing that he said is that he identifies more with villains. These are both things that he said to me after the series aired. And then he also said, well, if people are going to think I'm Q, I may as well embrace it. So these are not the kind of statements you would expect from somebody who is, who is not the thing that, I say he is in the series. I think that deep down he does want the credit, but he can't take it, perhaps because he's afraid of legal repercussions or other things. So he kind of gets as close as he can to admitting to it without doing it outright.
So, I'm curious as to, prior to this project, had you ever embarked on a project of this scope, and how intimidating was it to tackle a subject like this?
Well, I wouldn't say that I have tackled something where I was trying to uncover an anonymous character wielding untold influence over culture and politics at an ever increasing scale, with a digital army, in that individual's sails. Um, and I think one of the biggest challenges was HBO didn't come on until very late in the process. We didn't even start like September of 2020. So, this was all produced independently up until that point. And that DIY approach was really helpful in gaining access and, and adding intimacy. But man, I mean, no one's ever made, to my not, I mean, I guess they could exist, but doc series generally you don't make independently. And I knew while I was shooting this, I mean, I shot, I think, about 1,700 hours of footage, though I would often shoot multicam setups while I was doing it. So, I might have 2, 3, even 4 cameras running at a time. So that counts in that 1,700 hours. But I knew that it needed to be a series, and I didn't know where it was gonna air. So certainly there was a certain amount of stress with that because I'm sitting going, there's no way I can tell the story I need to tell if it's in feature form. But there wasn't really a model for releasing a series independently. So I knew I needed help in summer of 2020, and I basically beelined McKay. I did everything in my power to get Adam McKay's to get 60 minutes of edited material and the series breakdown and what I wanted to be in front of Adam McKay because I thought he was the guy. I thought he was going to get it, and you know a friend of a friend of a friend helped, a bunch of emails got in front of him, and he did. He got it, and within weeks we had it in front of HBO. So, um, it's yeah, seems like a series of chances to me. But that I guess that was just one sort of piece in this overall massive puzzle of improbabilities, which included trying to uncover, who was behind this massive global movement, their motivations, and unmask them. Because, once you do that, you're just left with the man. And before that, it's people could imagine Q as being anything that they wanted, all of the benefits, none of the frailties. Um, you ask anyone who believes in Q, and they have any number of possibilities. And that mystique is where Q derives so much of its power. And so, just by revealing who's behind it, you intentionally and unintentionally, it forces people to say, okay, well, if you want to believe in this thing, here's where those ideas come from, and here are the people behind it.
Well, Cullen, thank you so much for this. This was fantastic, and we wish you all the best this Emmy season. And to all of our viewers, please like this video, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com to make your predictions and see if you can outsmart the top prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks so much, Cullen.
Thank you, Charlie.